Welcome to the webinar, everyone. We're going to get started in about 30 to 45 seconds. Just give us a minute so we can let people join. Thank you. Thank you again for joining the webinar. We're going to get started shortly. Just bear with us 1 minute and we're going to get going. All right. Well, welcome again to the webinar. We want to thank you for joining us today. And this is a special webinar dedicated to mastering, hiring, and training with the disc analysis profiles produced by Dave Yoho Associates. This is Brad Yoho from Dave Yoho Associates, and I'm thrilled to be your host. Before we dive into the content of today's program, let's cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is scheduled for about 50 to 60 minutes, and we appreciate you setting aside time for the entire program, as we will be answering several questions and sharing important information about the disc at the end of the program. Let's start real quickly by breaking the ice. We'd love to hear from everybody who's joining us today. Please take a moment to introduce yourselves now by typing your name and where you're joining us today in the chat box in the platform. Shelby from our marketing team will be monitoring this. And if you have any technical issues or need more information about something mentioned during the program, please utilize the chat feature. Also, in addition to the questions we received prior to the program, we highly encourage you to ask additional questions you have during the workshop by using the Q&A functionality. Look for the Q&A box located on the Zoom platform, type in your question, and hit send. We're going to be monitoring this throughout, and while we may not be able to address every question, we will effort to respond to any unanswered questions afterwards. Finally, I hope that you have a copy of a completed disc analysis report on hand, as this will assist you with understanding the content of the program. However, if you do not, simply send us a message through the chat window, and Shelby will share a sample PDF report with you. Now, before we get started, we have a lot of different types of people on the webinar today, including current longtime users, new users, past users, and several people who are interested in using DISC for the first time. So be patient and recognize that the majority of the content will be applicable and assist you in better understanding the DISC profiles. Let's go ahead and launch a quick poll right now before we dive into the content here. All right. So we want to know why you're here today. You may have more than one reason for joining us today, but just for the purposes of this poll, go ahead and select the main reason why you're joining us on the program here today. And we're going to take a moment to leave that up while you respond, whether you're looking for advanced training, whether you need a refresher, whether you're a past user, or whether you're considering using it in your business. We want to know about it. So let's wait another few seconds for the responses to come in. We appreciate your feedback. All right, let's continue. Thank you. So, the 2026 Talent Blueprint, using DISC to hire better people and train them faster. We're going to focus on one of the most important competitive advantages your company can have in the remaining part of this year and into next year, the ability to hire the right people and get them productive faster than your competitors. Today, I'm going to show you how the disc analysis profile produced by Dave Yoho Associates can dramatically tighten your selection process, eliminate hiring guesswork, and accelerating training and coaching for every new hire. 2026 is shaping up to be a defining year for the industry. Now, as we All know lead costs are going to continue to rise, and customer expectations are evolving faster than most companies can keep up with. And with that, efficiency, both in the field and inside the office, is becoming the new bottom line. Margins are tightening, competition is intensifying, and the companies that survive will be the ones that operate with more clarity, more discipline, and more consistency than ever before. But even with all these external pressures, one challenge stands above all the rest: talent. Your ability to execute, scale, and deliver a world-class customer experience still comes down to the people representing your business every single day. Companies that consistently attract, select, and develop the right people will grow no matter what the market does. Companies that don't won't. It really is that simple. When you look at the companies that will dominate next year, you'll notice a clear pattern. They aren't guessing at who to hire. They aren't hoping their managers will figure it out. They've built a repeatable, predictable system for hiring the right people, training them quickly, and keeping them long enough to produce meaningful results. They have a structure for evaluating talent, a roadmap for onboarding, and a coaching approach that matches each employee's natural strengths. And that is exactly what DISC helps you do. This gives you a framework to understand how people communicate, how they make decisions, how they respond under pressure, and how they need to be coached. It takes the guesswork out of hiring, the frustration out of training, and the inconsistency out of management. When you use this correctly, you don't just fill roles, you build teams. You don't just onboard employees, you ramp them up faster. And you don't just train people, you develop high performers. 2026 will reward the companies that master this, and with the right behavioral tools, you can be one of them. Before we dive into hiring, let's quickly revisit what DISC actually measures. Now, DISC does not measure intelligence, skills, or experience. It measures what we call behavioral tendencies, or how someone naturally communicates, solves problems, handles pressure, and makes decisions. These tendencies strongly influence how fast someone ramps up, how much support and structure they need, whether they fit your culture and role, and how well they will be coached. DISC isn't about labeling people. It's about understanding the natural wiring someone brings into your organization. So what does hiring without the DISC versus hiring with DISC mean? Without DISC, hiring often relies on hope more than strategy. Decisions depend heavily on the interview, an environment where almost anyone can say the right thing for 30 to 45 minutes. And strong personalities often overshadow strong competencies. You may end up hiring the people you like, not necessarily people who truly fit the role or the demands of the job. Onboarding becomes a guessing game because you're trying to figure out how they learn, what motivates them, and what they need to succeed after they've already started. And inevitably, turnover rises because the role isn't aligned with who they naturally are. Now, when you incorporate DISC into your process, everything becomes clearer and more predictable. You know in advance what behaviors, work styles, and motivators lead to success in a specific role. You evaluate every candidate against measurable, role-specific behavioral benchmarks, not gut feelings. You can predict how quickly someone will adapt, learn, and ramp up to full productivity. Training becomes personalized. You tailor communication, expectations, and coaching to the individual, not a generic job title. And because new hires feel understood, supported, and set up for success, retention improves dramatically. Now, DISC doesn't replace your hiring process. It sharpens it, strengthens it, and makes it repeatable. It gives you the clarity to hire better, the insight to train smarter, and the consistency to build a team that you can count on. So, That is why you should use a DISC assessment. But why should you choose to use the DISC analysis profile that Dave Yoho Associates produces? We have conducted thousands of surveys and case studies on the results of the DISC report, and they are proven to be 85 to 90% accurate in analyzing an individual's motivators, strengths, weaknesses, along with how to best manage them and communicate effectively with them. The DISC analysis profile was also specifically designed for use in our industry. As such, it is highly effective at identifying ideal candidates for direct or in-home selling roles. And the DISC report that is produced is the most detailed roadmap for hiring the right individual, streamlining the onboarding process, and effectively managing, communicating, and retaining them. Also, the DISC analysis profile has been vetted by the Assessment Standards Institute, or ASI. Now, this is critical because A, it meets EEOC standards, but also it protects our customers from any laws such as Local Law 144 in New York. And this is a law that restricts the use of employers using most types of automated assessments. So to clarify, because the DISC analysis profile has been vetted by ASI, it is not at risk from similar laws being passed around the country, which are highly likely at this point in time. Here are several guidelines for the DISC analysis profile. It's not a test. That is nomenclature. It comes out when you speak. You tend to call it a test. It's not a test. It's not a selection tool. You want to make sure to get that through your communication, that you never communicated as such. Similarly, there are no right or wrong answers or bad profile patterns. That's not what the DISC is. The DISC profile can be used by a company of any size, any department, any team, if it is used as intended. It does not measure personality, intelligence, or skill level. We said that earlier. Want to repeat it here. Most of you are probably familiar or have heard of Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is value added, but it measures personality. And personality is different from behavior, even though people use these words interchangeably. The difference between personality and behavior is critical when assigning candidates to take an assessment, because behavior, unlike personality, is often influenced by an individual's current work environment. Personality, which the Myers-Briggs measures, cannot change, meaning that the assessment will give you an accurate representation of a candidate's values, views, set responses, patterns of thought, and characteristics which are static. They don't change over time. The DISC analysis profile measures behavior, which can change. This is critical because by taking it, people and you will get an understanding of someone's capacity to perform the job role while also being provided with strategies for how to maximize their effectiveness and teach them to adapt their behavior to constantly seek improvement in their role. So if you are familiar with how to evaluate the DISC report, apologize, but we want to give some clarity to people who are relatively new. We're going to go through this quickly. Make sure you have your DISC report on hand for this part. And again, there's several people that are new here, so we want to make sure to give them a little insight as to how DISC works. The DISC profile measures 4 primary behavioral traits: dominance, influence, steadiness, and what we refer to as competence compliance. Someone's DISC pattern is calculated through a series of word choice questions related to their behavior, their preferences, and reactions in a given situation. It doesn't really take more than 7 to 8 minutes for them to take the profile. Further, the questions are designed to assess where individuals fall on a spectrum of 1 to 100 for each behavioral trait. Next, each response is assigned a score corresponding to 1 or more of the 4 DISC traits. The scores are compiled to create a profile that reflects the individual's dominant and their less dominant traits. Once the responses are completed, The result is a detailed disc report that provides analysis on the individual's behavior and their fit within your organization. Now, if you have that report in front of you, go ahead and turn to page 5, and you're going to see the primary graph of the disc report. So this graph represents what we call the inspirational pattern. And it's someone who has a dominant D and what we would refer to as a secondarily dominant I. You may also know that their S, or steadiness, and C, competent compliant, are below that midline. The midline is what divides the level of intensity for certain behaviors. Anything above that midline, that's considered a high behavior. Anything below that midline is considered a low behavior. It's rare that someone can be high in 3, but occasionally you'll see it. What you won't see is someone who's high in all 4 behaviors. Everyone has strengths, everyone has areas for improvement. The pattern that you see here, or what we call a high D, high I, can be defined as a strong sales pattern. High Ds ask for the order. High Is are adept at establishing rapport with prospects. Now, let's expound on what the 4 different behaviors of the DISC mean. I want to get into this real quickly just to give you a summary of the highs and lows of each behavior and what they mean. So, high Ds, they generate ideas. They're active, they're assertive, they take a direct approach to obtaining results. Low Ds, on the other hand, they're more organized, they're less assertive, they're more calculated in their approach. High Is, they approach others in an outgoing, energetic, and socially, that's the key word, socially aggressive manner. They love promoting new ideas. They want to control their emotions, but they also want to control the emotions of others. Low Is, on the other hand, are more sincere in the way they approach others. They can be thought of as more reserved, more congenial. They place a premium on controlling their emotions with a sincere and logical approach. High S's, they're controlled, they're cautious, they're deliberate. They like a predictable environment with a secure situation. They like disciplined behavior, they're excellent at following up. Low S's, they gravitate towards flexibility, a dynamic environment. They want freedom of expression. High C's, cross the T, dot the I, highly detail oriented. They want to avoid conflict if possible, and they may take criticism personally. Low C's, on the other hand, have difficulty adhering to policies, rules, and standards, and they do not like structured settings. So, this is the next page of the DISC report. And this is the real power behind it. When you're looking at an individual's report, the main graph that was just showed was what we refer to as me as I see me, meaning this is how they see their own behavior, or it's referred to as self-perception. Page 6 of the report shows this graph again, but it also adds 2 additional graphs, stress plus and mask. So what do these graphs mean? Regarding the stress measurement, as individuals, we will normally tend to function differently if we are operating under inordinate pressure or stress. Everyone interprets stress differently, but if someone is in a role that involves a lot of communication, a strong indicator of success is for their eye to go up under stress. That's what you see here on the screen. It doesn't go up much, but you see that their eye goes up under stress. That's a great sign. This shows that they are working towards stronger co-communication with their customers, prospects, or people that they may manage. Regarding the mask measurement, this measures how other individuals with differing behavior or the environment that they're in causes someone to behave. Now, one thing you want to make note of when you're looking at a report from somebody is if graph, the one on the far left, the self-perception, and the mask graph are significantly different, the candidate may be forcing behaviors. That's not inherently bad, but it is unsustainable in the long term. So what does forcing behaviors mean? An example would be someone who's a naturally low I trying to act like a high I because the job involves people. They can fake it during an interview, but they're not going to be able to sustain it for years. And we're going to get into this a little more about why it's important to combine the disc with your natural interviewing process. Here, I want to get into the 5-step process for maximizing your use of the disc. But before we do that, we're going to launch another quick poll that talks about interviewing and the disc. So we want to hear from everybody here. Do you give candidates the assessment before or after the in-person interview? Now, if you don't currently use an assessment, that's fine. Just mark it as such. If you do it before, please indicate it. If you do it after, if you do multiple interviews, let us know. But please give a quick response when you have a chance. You're going to bear with us for one more second while we allow you to get that response in. All right. Let's go ahead and close that poll now. So, the 5-step process that we're going to give now for maximizing your use of the disc. Step 1, define the behavioral requirements of the role. Before you ever look at a candidate's disc profile, you need to first define what the role requires. For example, an in-home salesperson needs confidence, pace, resilience, and persuasion. A call center representative, they may need steadiness, empathy, structure. It really depends on what you have your representative do, but you need to define it. That's how you're going to be able to match it with the disc. An installer needs precision, consistency, and patience. Again, the disc is not a sales assessment tool. It's a tool that allows you to evaluate the behavioral fit of anybody in your organization. And each role carries its own behavioral strengths. So your first step is to map it out. Which disc tendencies perform or predict high performance in the role? When you know the target, you stop making emotional hiring decisions and start making strategic ones. Step 2, compare the candidate against the behavioral benchmark. Once you know the ideal tendencies for a position, you compare each candidate's disc profile to that benchmark. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean rejecting somebody because their profile isn't the perfect fit, but what it does mean is this. You'll know where they naturally align with the job, and you're going to know where they're going to struggle, and you're going to know what kind of support and or coaching they're going to need. This is where DISC becomes a prediction tool. You can see potential issues before someone is hired instead of discovering them months later. So the poll we did was very interesting. It really touched on showing that many of you on the program today who are already using an assessment are giving people the disc after the interview. I want to get into that a little bit now. Because once you're interviewing, DISC becomes one of the most powerful tools that you're going to have. Each behavioral style comes with predictable strengths and potential pitfalls. DISC gives you targeted interview questions that probe deeper. For example, here's some questions you could ask. To high D candidates, tell me about a time when your confidence got ahead of your preparation. High I candidates, walk me through how you stay organized when things get busy. High S candidates, how do you handle rapid last-minute changes? High C candidates, what do you do when you don't have enough information to make a decision? Now, the great thing about these questions is that A, they're open-ended, can't just respond with a simple yes or no. But B, on top of that, they really touch at the challenges behind each of these individual behaviors. So each question is targeted towards areas where a high D, I, S, and C may struggle. As such, these questions reveal not just what a candidate says, but how self-aware they are. One more added benefit is when you give someone the disc before they have the in-person interview, is they don't feel that the disc was the sole determinant of not getting the job. We've dealt with people before who have given someone the disc and immediately after the results have come in, have told them they're not a fit. And they may do everything else right, but that's not really the best impression you want to leave with somebody, that the disc is the reason why they didn't get the job. That's another reason why you either want to do it before the interview or you want to do it in between interviews. So step 4, predict ramp up speed and training needs. The best companies don't just hire better, they get people productive faster. DISC lets you tailor onboarding by answering 2 questions. What is this person naturally good at? And what will require more structure, support, or repetition? For example, high Ds, they want quick wins, they want autonomy. High Is learn best through interaction and encouragement. High S's need step-by-step structure and reassurance. High C's, they want clarity and they want precision. So when you match the onboarding to the person, you speed up confidence, competence, and contribution. Step 5, coach their behavioral strengths. Coaching is one of the more overlooked benefits of DISC. Most managers coach people the way they like to be coached, not the way their employees respond best. So here's how DISC changes that. High Ds respond to direct, fast, outcomes-focused coaching. High Is need encouragement, recognition, and conversation. High S's need time, stability, and clear expectation, and high C's need logic, detail, and proof. When coaching matches the person, accountability becomes easier, performance improves, and turnover consequentially drops. So why does this matter as we head into 2026? Well, we're entering a year where talent shortages are going to continue, competition is going to intensify, and the companies with the strongest people, not the biggest budgets, will win. The margin for error is shrinking, and the organizations that rise above the noise will be the ones that build teams intentionally, systematically, and with a clear understanding of what drives performance. And that's where DISC becomes a competitive advantage. DISC gives you a hiring process that is more accurate. You're no longer relying on gut instinct, personality impressions, or interview charisma. You're evaluating candidates based on the behavioral traits that predict real success in the role. Training that is more effective. Instead of guessing what each new hire needs, you tailor your approach to how they naturally learn, communicate, and take action. This cuts onboarding time and accelerates productivity. Coaching that is more personalized. Managers stop using a one-size-fits-all style. With DISC, they can motivate people differently, resolve conflict faster, and keep employees engaged and performing at a higher level. It also allows for teams that are more productive. When communication improves and expectations are clear, performance rises, accountability strengthens, and turnover drops. Simply put, 2026 is going to reward companies that invest in people, not casually, not reactively, but with precision, clarity, and a proven framework behind every decision. Now, as I shared earlier, we have conducted hundreds of case studies over our decades of utilizing the DISC. For the companies that use it as intended, the results have been remarkable. One company was struggling with high sales turnover. which was not only costly, but also disruptive to growth and team morale. Traditional hiring methods, such as relying on interviews and gut instinct, weren't providing consistent results. By incorporating behavioral screening using the DISC, the company was able to identify candidates whose natural tendencies aligned with the skills, pace, and resilience required for success in the role. They weren't just hiring people who seemed like a fit. They were selecting people who had the behavioral profile of a high performer. Within a single year, this change led to a 45% reduction in sales turnover, stabilizing the team, reducing recruitment costs, and allowing managers to focus on coaching rather than constantly replacing their sales staff. The effect rippled through the business, improving team cohesion, customer interactions, and revenue performance. Another example, a company with a sizable call center kept having inconsistent results year after year. Some representatives thrived, others struggled, even when doing the same work and receiving the same coaching. By analyzing DISC profiles, managers realized that high S representatives responded best to steady encouragement, structure, and clear expectations. High D representatives, on the other hand, thrived under challenge, autonomy, and direct feedback. By tailoring coaching approaches to each DISC type, the call center improved team engagement, reduced frustration, and significantly increased their set and confirmation rates. This approach turned underperforming employees into reliable contributors and improved overall operational efficiency. Even in operational roles like installation, behavioral alignment can make a dramatic difference. One company's installation department faced the challenge of new hires taking too long to reach full productivity, and this slowed timelines and impacted customer satisfaction. By analyzing profiles and adjusting onboarding to match each individual's learning style, trainers could emphasize areas where employees needed guidance, allow others to move quickly through familiar concepts, and provide support in a way that aligned with natural tendencies. The result? Training time was cut by 30%, productivity increased, and employees were more confident and engaged on the job. Now, all these examples show a crucial point. Small targeted adjustments based on understanding human behavior can create what we refer to as outsized results. Whether it's hiring, training, or coaching, integrating DISC into your processes allows you to predict performance, accelerate ramp up, reduce turnover, and increase overall team productivity. The returns they may begin as small shifts in approach, but they compound quickly, transforming teams, departments, and entire companies. So in short, investing time in understanding your people and aligning their natural strengths with the roles and expectations you set doesn't just improve individual performance, it multiplies results across the organization. This is why DISC isn't just a tool. It's a strategic advantage in 2026 and beyond. So many of you have seen this before. If you're a customer of ours, this is what we refer to as the communication chart. And we have a ton of resources. This actually isn't in the DISC report for those of you that have that in front of you, but this is one of the resources that we make available to you. And it significantly improves your understanding of how to better communicate with your team members. Now, if you haven't seen this before, take a screenshot of this graphic. This communication chart shows you how different behavioral styles prefer to communicate and be communicated with. Look at the second row from the bottom and then the last row that's underneath it. Imagine the benefits of knowing that your team members are under stress and how to act in order to reduce their stress. This chart is an underused benefit of using the DISC analysis profile that everyone should be taking advantage of. Here's another resource that we make available, and this shows the likelihood of conflict when individuals with the same or different behavioral styles interact. The red boxes indicate a stronger ability to get along, and as the color shifts towards blue, towards the right, it indicates a stronger likelihood of conflict arising. Now, this doesn't mean that you should never pair a high D with a high C, but what it does do is prepare you for the challenges that you may be facing when you do so. So, what's the next step here? If your goal is to hire the right people and get them fully productive faster in 2026, the next step isn't just hiring smarter, it's building a repeatable, predictable behavioral system. Without a structured approach, even the most talented managers and recruiters can struggle with inconsistency, and results will vary from team to team, department to department, and so on. A behavioral system ensures that every decision, from hiring to coaching, is intentional, consistent, and aligned with the needs of the business. Implementing this system means several key steps. Identifying behavioral benchmarks for each role. So before hiring, define exactly what behaviors, tendencies, and motivators predict success for each position. What does a top performing salesperson look like in terms of communication, decision making, and problem solving? How does a high performing installer approach their work under pressure? Mapping these behavioral expectations creates a clear target for hiring and performance evaluation. Second would be using DISC before and during interviews. DISC allows you to measure behavioral alignment objectively. By incorporating DISC into the hiring process, you can screen candidates for the traits that matter most and ask targeted interview questions that reveal strengths, potential gaps, and how the candidate will respond to common workplace scenarios. And what this does is reduce guesswork, it speeds up decision making, and increases the likelihood of selecting candidates who are going to thrive. Customizing onboarding. Not all employees learn the same way or need the same support. This provides insight into how each individual naturally processes information, learns new skills, and responds to structure or feedback. By tailoring onboarding to match these tendencies, new hires get up to speed faster, they feel supported, and they gain confidence quickly. Coaching based on natural tendencies, or the last bullet point, coaching framework. Once employees are on board, the next step is ongoing coaching. This gives managers the tools to communicate effectively, motivate appropriately, and address challenges in a way that resonate with each team member. This means performance issues can be prevented rather than just corrected, and strong performers can continue to grow and contribute at higher levels. When every manager follows the same playbook, using the same behavioral benchmarks, interview approach, onboarding strategy, and coaching methodology, performance stops being inconsistent. Instead, it becomes predictable, scalable, and repeatable. Teams across your company can achieve higher results, turnover decreases, and top performers thrive. In other words, a behavioral system isn't just a nice to have. It's a strategic framework that ensures your people, your processes, and your results are aligned for growth in 2026 and beyond. So remember this, success in 2026 will not be determined by who works the hardest. It will be determined by who hires and develops people the best. This gives you the clarity, structure, and insight to build a stronger, more productive team, faster, and with less turnover. Now, we got a lot of questions before the webinar, and I want to take a moment to address a few of them now while we have a moment. But if you have any questions on what was covered, uh, please submit them now. Don't leave just yet. We got more to come, but I want to take a moment to answer some questions. So if you have any, please submit them through the Q&A or the chat window right now. Now, most of the questions that were asked were really more about the overall recruiting and hiring process as opposed to the disc, but I'll take a moment to answer some of them because I really value the fact that you asked such great questions. Someone asked how do we know if someone is lying about their experience? I mean, the first thing you want to look for is red flags in their story. Sometimes someone will give you vague timelines. I think it was sometime in 2022, just being vague, not being specific about things sometimes is a red flag. You also want to look for inconsistency. We touched on this a little bit with the disc, but you can also look for inconsistencies between the resume and their verbal explanation. And if you do a phone screen, what they say there. Uh, if they cannot explain the how behind their achievements. So you ask for behavioral specifics. For example, for a salesperson, what you may want to say is walk me step by step through how you handled a price objection from a homeowner. If they have significant sales experience, that should be a question they can answer very easily without much hesitation. You can also ask for evidence. Uh, there's nothing wrong with asking for a pay stub or some other proof that someone worked at a place and what they say matches what they're telling you. I can do role play. People who haven't done a job, particularly with sales, they may really struggle to role play. So these are just some ways that you can catch people who are being dishonest about their experience. So I'd encourage you to look into that. We got a question here. Let me pull that up. Do you mind repeating the questions you suggested in step 3? Absolutely. Let me go back to that slide. So you can come up with your own here. I mean, there's a multitude of questions you can ask based on high D, high I, high S, and high C, behaviors. The key, I think, is that you want to find a way to ensure that people are answering questions that reflects that they're a high D, a high I, a high S, or a high C, or it asks them to overcome things that high D's, high I's, high S's, and high C's that they struggle with. So, for example, a high D, you may want to ask them a question that just how do you build rapport with a customer during the sales process, something that just gives more concrete examples on what they do. High I's, give a scenario where you've had to develop rapport with a challenging prospect. High S's, can you provide an example where you worked uh, with team members to overcome a challenging situation? High S's are strong team players. High C's, um, what does it look like for you when you're asked to do a project quickly? That's an example of something that a high C would have to overcome because they're very detail oriented. It's hard for them to do things quickly. So those aren't the same questions that I asked earlier. Um, I wanted to give the benefit of asking some different types of questions for you, because there's so many questions you could ask, and you'll get better at it. You get more comfortable at it as you go along. Um, but hopefully that answers your question there. Any other questions, please submit them now. I think we may have a couple more here. Someone asked what questions should we be asking pre-interview and during the interview? That's a great question because we didn't really touch on that. We did touch on the interview, but we touched more on this questions. We can touch on some other types of questions too. Pre-interview or screening questions are really designed to filter out mismatches. So an example might be, what's your ideal income for the next 12 months? Checks expectations against your compensation plan. Or what about our opportunity specifically attracted you? That's a generic question, but it separates job seekers from what we would call intentional applicants. What is your experience working with homeowners or in commission-based roles? Why are you considering leaving your current position? That's a question you can ask to try and see if someone takes any responsibility for that or if they're looking to just blame somebody for their current situation. Um, Obviously, the job screening, that's a much quicker type of process. So during the interview, you're really looking for questions where they have a chance to shine more. So maybe a question you'd want to ask that's not a disc related question is, what were your KPIs in your last role and how do you perform against them? Uh, Another one might be, walk me through a typical workday in your last job. What does that look like? Another one might be, can you provide me a detailed response for what type of coaching you respond best to? Or for a salesperson, you may want to ask, give me an example of a difficult customer and how you handled it. So, you're looking for questions that are open-ended, that give candidates a chance to shine, to confirm any positive things you think about them, and to conflict uh, or show any negative things that may come up. Again, if you have any other questions, we have some time here, so go ahead and submit those. Someone is asking for good places to find candidates. I mean, there's a lot of good places. I think it's always best to start with employee referrals, especially for sales roles. Uh, that's typically the best place to find success. It's typically what yields the lowest turnover. Um, Obviously, you can look towards people who have worked for competitors in the past. You have to be careful about that for a lot of reasons, but it can be very successful. A lot of people use Indeed sponsored ads with role specific titles. That's a very strong way to find good people right now. Um, Facebook groups, that's another strong one as well. Uh, Job fairs at trade schools. Another one that's pretty good is customer service retail. A lot of these people are already used to selling and having long conversations with people, so they can thrive in that role. And again, you don't necessarily have to hire somebody who has previous in-home salesperson experience. We've seen for years that some of the best professionals, they're doing this for the first time and they don't have the biases that a lot of long-term salespeople have when you try to train them in your system. Um, so we got another question here. How to hire, sorry about that. How do we hire into the younger generation and train them to be rock stars? Yeah, that's a tricky one, especially if you're not. kind of in touch with what they prefer. I think one of the things that we hear is a lot of younger people today are looking for quick wins. They want bonuses, they want achievements built into the job. They're looking for those kind of attaboys to give them the benefits that they need. So that would be one thing. I think clarity is always good. An exact schedule, an exact pay structure. And that's tricky sometimes in sales roles, but as exact as you can. Speed is critical. Many young people are going to accept the first good offer that they get. So, as with any type of hire, for the most part, that's in sales, you want to be quick to hire as possible. As far as training them, just keep in mind that most younger people today learn very different. They prefer short, compact lessons or things that are not drawn out. They may not respond as best if you're showing them videos or training videos that are an hour long, as opposed to showing them videos that are 5 to 6 minutes tops and giving them the opportunity to learn in the way that is conducive to them. Um, Gamifying things is a good idea too. A lot of people respond great to that right now. Pairing people with a mentor is probably one of the best ways. Someone who can guide and support them, not the boss, but someone who has experience in the sales role, who can help them overcome some of the challenges that they're going to face and help get them through it. So I hope that answers your question about the younger generation. Any other questions that anybody has right now? Please submit them as we near the finish line. All right. So we're offering two things on the call today. One is for our current customers, people who are already using the disc with us, the disc analysis profile. Uh, Maybe you have somebody new who you've hired who's taken over some of the responsibilities of this. Maybe it's been a while since you've used it. Maybe you just want to ask some very specific targeted questions. So if you need a refresher on using your Disc account with us, you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute call with a Dave Yoho associate, and we're going to walk you through the best practices. We're going to answer your questions. Go ahead and scan that QR code on the screen. If you're a current customer, take advantage of that. Limited availability as we near the holiday season. So again, if you are a current customer, go ahead and scan that QR code now. If you are considering using the assessments, it's very easy to get started with us. And it's less than 500. It says, you know what? It's actually less than $400 because we're waiving the setup fee for you to get started. You can get 10 profiles, which is the starter set, for less than $400, $399. Scan that QR code and you'll learn more. We also offer two additional assessments you can use: the sales aptitude appraisal, which is a assessment that measures someone's sales skill ability, and the leadership and competency evaluation, which, if you're a leader, every leader should be taking. It shows where your leadership strengths are and where you can improve in the organization. But if you sign up today, you're going to get 10 disc profiles. Uh, we're going to walk you through how to use the account. You're going to have your own login information. Very simple to use. The assessments don't go anywhere. So if you're saying, I don't have many hiring needs right now, I just need to hire one person, I don't know if I need 10 profiles, they don't go anywhere. They don't expire. So you're not going to lose them for any reason. So if you're considering using it, I definitely recommend taking advantage of that now. It's a great opportunity to get started. And if you're joining us today, that's why you're here. You're here to make the difference in your hires. You're here to make the difference in your talent. And the disc provides you with that roadmap for hiring and training. I think we have some people who are either asking questions or submitting something through the chat window. So just bear with me for 1 second. Someone is asking a question. So I'm going to go ahead and answer this question. Again, if you are considering ordering the profiles, go ahead and scan that QR code on the screen right now and go ahead and do that and place that order. But we do have one more question, it looks like. Paul asks, say you find a very good candidate, but they conflict with your existing staff. Is it a lost cause or can they work out? Uh, that really depends on who's managing them at the end of the day. One of the challenges, because everyone has had um, salespeople, let's say as an example, who are just mavericks. They need very little training. They kind of have their own way of doing things, and they're very successful. So, in other words, someone's closing at 40% against leads issued, and they're not doing quite everything you ask them to do. You're probably going to let them get away with it because of how strong they are and the results they're coming in. But you have to be very careful that in sales meetings and interactions, they do not have a negative influence on your existing personnel. That really falls on the heels of management. You have to have someone who has a really high D managing those people. Uh, so we didn't touch on sales profiles a lot, but there's a pattern called the persuader, which is a very strong pattern for salespeople. Um, the D is the secondary behavior, the I is the highest. The problem about persuaders coming managers is because a lot of times the D isn't high enough to manage those maverick sales professionals. So just keep that in mind, uh, especially if you're promoting from within a salesperson to a sales manager. A lot of people are not fits. It's not it's not the same type of role as everybody on the call likely knows today. But I would say the majority of it falls on management. You can make it work. Keep in mind you are still trying to generate a lot of business. That's why you're here. So at the end of the day, if the results are happening, that's a good thing, but you don't want it to be to the detriment of your other professionals. Thanks for that question. Someone's asking, how long does it take to receive a report after completion? Immediately. We have a system in place where somebody takes it about 6 to 7 minutes, and the results come to whatever email you have in the portal. Now, it may go to spam sometimes. That's rare though, but it'll come within seconds. So, hope that answers your question. Let's see if we got any more here. Looks like all the open questions have been answered. Um, if you have a last minute question, we got a couple minutes here. Happy to answer that for you. And just appreciate everyone being on the program today, taking the time to learn more about the DISC profiles, A, for their value as an assessment, but B, for the benefits of combining it with what you're already doing in your recruiting and hiring processes. Um, if you take the time to use the disc as it's intended, I guarantee you will be successful. That's not some type of false statement or trick. You're going to be successful if you use it as intended. Um, this is something that's been around for decades. It predicts success of individuals, but what it also does, as we covered today, is it shows people where they need to improve. And that's the underused part of it, is using it as a training tool after someone is hired. If you're using an assessment, whether it's the disc analysis profile or something else, Don't just use it to hire somebody and then put it on the shelf and never look at it again or never have them look at it again. You want to make sure that you refer back to it for retraining. Um, when you see someone's performance slipping, when you're considering moving someone into a different role, these are all times where you can revisit the disc. You can also have people take it again. As I said, behavior is not static, it can change over time. So, for example, if someone takes a profile one time and then takes it 2 to 3 years later, the pattern can be different. It's probably not going to be dramatically different, but it can be different. People have role changes, they take on new tasks, and their behavior just changes over time. So, these are all things that you can use. You're just getting an abundance of information. Information is so critical because the more information you have, the better informed decisions you can make about the people you're bringing into the business and how to ramp them up towards success. So it looks like we are out of questions. If you have a question for me, my email is Brad, BRAD, at DaveYoho.com. Feel free to email me at any time, whether you're a customer or not. Happy to answer your questions. Really appreciate everyone being on the program today. Hope anyone who is not a customer becomes one, and hope to hear you all again and see you all again at a future program. Thank you.